Yeah, I'll do it. I'll just be distracted with baby. How's it going?
Actually, mine's the baby, baby girls.
Okay, this is the last one. Finishing up. I want to thank Jeremy for covering for me last week when I was gone. Did a great job. And, to finish it up, we're going to look at more of the more opinion or scripture based type disagreements. But I think we have to get an idea of what are the works of the church. Can anybody tell me the works of the church? Okay, evangelism. That'd be the Great Commission, Mark 16:16, 15 and 16. What else? Okay, benevolence. There you go. There's one more. One more. And this work of the church does not apply outside the congregation.
It does not apply.
Right.
Training and discipleship? No.
Edification.
Edification of each other.
The works of the church are edification, evangelism, and benevolence. Now, last week Jeremy was touching on benevolence. Definitely. There's a definite argument and I am surprised did everybody else know that was like a big deal?
I didn't even
The the orphan home issue,
hear.
that kind of stuff, that's like a big deal back in the day.
Correct. You don't give the.
That's a huge deal. And it still is today. It's still one that is carried from around the I think that one came up in like the 1920s, 30s, somewhere in there, maybe the 40s. Came up in there. But that is a big deal because what that really is that would be a form of benevolence. It could be evangelism, but at the point that we're at, if they're like a 501c3, the nonprofit tax deal. So now they're government regulated, so you can't really have the evangelism part in it. I mean, you can, but you're limited. But it is a benevolent work. But what that brought into question was the concept, and it is a belief by some congregations of saints-only benevolence. Saints-only benevolence. So you can only apply, benevolence through the church only applies to those who are members of the church. You can only help members of the church. So that would be, say we had our widows and orphans, or our widows. We have widows. It would be us taking care of them if their family couldn't. Or if we have members within the congregation in need, we are only allowed to help them. That is what that concept is.
Gives you more straight with that.
And, yeah, it does actually. So, but then you go back to Galatians 6 argument of do good to all men, especially those in the household of faith. So you can extend it to those in the congregation that would be in need. Or you could say a needy congregation. So we have one of those. We do that right now. Agreed. We do that right now because they need that support. So there's a congregation still there. If not, there wouldn't be a congregation there. But that is a scriptural work of the church. I mean, that is a scriptural thing. Now, evangelism, we all know. That's definitely a work of the church. We're to evangelize those outside the church. And we're to evangelize those within the church. But the edification organization part, that applies only to those in the church. We're to build up to strengthen one another. Okay? So keep those in mind as we kind of go through this. Because if we're going to do something, it needs to fit within one of those to be scriptural. Okay? Is that fair? We would need to follow the Word. And to do that, it's going to fall within one of those three things. Now, let's go back. Let's turn to Romans 14. And I want to actually I want you to mark Romans 14. Because we'll go into that. And there's been one of those things like that, such as when Jeremy was talking about that orphan home discussion. Does everybody know the history of some of this stuff? Real fast. I'm going to go through it real fast, okay? All right. So, is anybody familiar with the Missionary Society of like the 1800s? It's like the 1870s or so. Okay, when the Restoration movement was going, remember, we were at one time, long ago, the Christian church and the Church of Christ were the same. They were the same thing. We were together. But divisions arose. One of the two major causes of the division that arose was the Missionary Society. Okay? Now, the Missionary Society is definitely proof that just because we think something is a good idea doesn't mean it is. Because what we think is a good idea doesn't mean it's what God says is the right idea. Now, so the Missionary Society was established in order to create an organization that would go and evangelize. Go and do the work of the church. Okay? And what they wanted to do is they wanted to have these individual congregations go send support or people to this missionary society, and then this missionary society would go out and do the work of the church. Now, is that a scriptural practice? Is it scriptural for a congregation to send money, support, or send their own people to an organization in order for that organization to do the work of the church? Is that a scriptural practice?
You have to argue that Paul was an organization.
No, he was a minister. He was a missionary.
I know, but
It's different.
you'd have to argue that Paul singularly with his 2 or 3 people was going everywhere, and he was sent by, received by, and that doesn't quite fit.
But this is an organization that has a board, a president,
That's not the same.
a council, all of that stuff. Is that a scriptural practice? For someone else, for the church to send support to someone else in order for that organization to do their work?
It was para-organization, para-something as well.
That's what it is. It's a parachurch organization. Is that okay?
I don't see it.
Is each of the Lord's congregation responsible for their own work?
Yes.
Yes. Is the church given authority to pass that work on to someone else in their community? No.
Because if you was to do that, you don't know who you're passing it on to. You know what I mean?
Right.
You know, they may hire somebody, and then the people that they send are not doing good.
Right. So, here's my point. The Missionary Society of that day, what would be a good analogous organization today that we would have that would be that?
Salvation
Okay, Salvation Army would be one. That's a good one. How about the Southern Baptist Convention?
That's a big,
That's a big one.
that's not necessarily para, that actually runs the
Well,
South
we're
Baptist.
gonna get into that too.
Yeah, that's.
So that, it can be, because they determine what evangelism takes place.
They determine who's in there.
And who does what and who does anything.
Sounds pretty close.
Could you argue somewhere like Bear Valley is one of these organizations?
That is possible.
Because
Okay.
They do the same thing.
Because here's what I want, this is why I'm going into this. This is the original thing that divided us. That and instrumental music, and the introduction to instrumental music. So, what Jeremy was talking about, because this happened, this right here happened, okay? So where could I put colleges, orphan homes in this picture? Where could it go? Would it be its own separate thing? Or would it be here in the middle where everybody sends stuff to and then they do the work?
That's who's running it. That's the question.
Okay.
Who is over it?
So,
And it kind of gets complicated, I mean, I was thinking through this, because, like, I think well, we'll start with the Tipton home. So it's overseen by the elders, but because of our United States laws, it's actually a separate organization. So it's not the church, but the elders
That's
oversee
very
it.
relevant.
But without our laws, that wouldn't be necessary, it's just necessary because it has to be.
but see, that's the thing though. The argument is not against a single church supporting an orphan home to do work, because that church is an organization, it's something within the church. The problem that the people have found that comes, or that the argument is multiple people are sending, multiple congregations are sending stuff to something, and then that is doing that work because multiple people are doing it. So they're considering it an organization outside of the church. Now, I'm just telling you the historical arguments, okay? This is not, Jeremy's already covered this, okay?
I just started it, I didn't cover it.
All right.
I didn't give an answer, Cody.
So, what this becomes from this picture right here, because there was a big hullabaloo about the orphan homes and the colleges. Specifically, the colleges is the bigger thing than like the orphan homes. They just kind of got lumped in together with it. The colleges, what was happening is that congregations were putting into their budget, which the question of whether or not we can have a budget is scriptural in itself. But they were setting aside this amount to go to the college, to fund the college, which and these were college, these were like training preachers and stuff. It'd be like equivalent to Bear Valley. But these schools are like, that's like Pepperdine, Abilene Christian now. Harding. The only one that did not do that was Florida College. They were completely self-sustaining. Now at this point in time, I don't know of any congregations that directly contribute straight to a college at this point. But the big thing that caused the division is you had a group that says it's okay, and you have a group that says it didn't. And the group that said it's okay to do had people those that were advocating it were telling congregations, you should do this or it's wrong. You should put this in your budget. And telling other congregations, other preachers, you should advocate to your congregation to put this in your budget. Now I'm going to tell you right now, and this would be me, I don't think that's okay. At all. Because we don't have any scriptural backing for that. As far as the colleges go.
But then how are they telling them that they had?
because they wanted them.
But if you don't have that scripture backing it, how could you convince a whole?
They treated it as a work of the church. Specifically, that would have been an evangelism work of the church. They were lumping that under an evangelism thing because we're going to all the world. But the other problem becomes is whenever you have, and this one I know you will be familiar with. How about the sponsoring church arrangement? Is anybody familiar with that? You ever heard of that, Muzzy? The sponsoring church arrangement?
I'm not sure.
I think it sounds similar to what they're doing at Keys. Tahlequah, Keys didn't have anybody, and Tahlequah provided everybody. I don't know if that's the same thing. but-
That is planning. That's different.
Okay.
Okay, the sponsoring church arrangement. Note, I want you guys definitely to notice this. Has the actual diagram changed at all? What is the only thing that has changed? The middle. Okay? The sponsoring church arrangement is, it became a thing because of a radio program. And I can't remember the name of that program for the life of me. It was back in like the, let's say the 50s and 60s. I know it was in Texas. I want to believe it is in the Lubbock area. But that could be wrong.
Said it's a radio program.
So, there was a radio program that originally was established, which there's nothing wrong with that, is there? I mean, using radio to preach, to spread the word. Nothing wrong with that. It was originally started, if I remember correctly, it was started by a congregation in Texas. Well, the problem became they could not afford to keep doing it. Therefore, they sent the word out for congregations to send them money in order to so they could keep the program going. And that caused a huge deal as well. And these are all being a culmination of things, okay? It's not just one thing that has separated each off every time. It was a building thing. And this turned into be, that program, this idea turned into be like the straw that broke the camel's back. You had a congregation that was a large congregation, mind you, needing money to pay for this work that they're doing and asking other congregations to send money in order to further this work. Now, is that okay to do? I'm asking you, is that a scriptural practice to do that?
So, okay, one more time. Okay, so can one church ask another church to pay for work that they're doing to spread the word?
That is correct.
Is there an example in the New Testament of one congregation requesting help? Let's start with that. Is there a congregation requesting help from another congregation?
Yes.
So we see Paul individually did it, but then they took up a collection to give to, what was it Ephesus? Who was it?
Jerusalem.
Jerusalem. So they took a collection up to the Jerusalem. So there is one congregation helping another congregation.
In what manner, though? What was the reason for that?
Yeah, because if it was just for their work that they thought was,
What was going on in Jerusalem at that time that caused a need to
There
happen?
was a big drought and
A
famine
famine.
that was going on.
So that is a benevolent work. Is there any example outside of supporting a missionary of multiple congregations supporting one congregation in order for them to do their work. And then those congregations are saying that is our evangelism effort. Can you think of a scriptural support for that?
You know, I've been thinking a lot about this because I'll probably, I don't know if we'll get to it today, but L2L was just recently brought up to me, and they threw that into this.
They try to, yes.
And no, it was done to me recently.
Mhm.
And I've been thinking about it, and most of these things are first world problems.
Yeah, yeah.
Vast majority, almost every one of these divisions are first world problems.
Now I will ask you, unlike the L2L stuff, how would you say that? Would you say that as benevolence? Would you say that as evangelism? Or would you say that as edification? It goes back, the L2L stuff is right there with like Bible class.
I know, that's exactly, and the more I read.
That is not an organization.
The thing is who oversees it, and it does have members, and they vote, and they do that kind of stuff. It is an organization, it is a separate entity legally. It is so many things that I don't.
Now,
It's
here's
not.
how you have to look at this. Are we, like on the L2L thing, are we sending money to L2L? Do we have that in the budget to send to L2L?
That was the thing.
Or do we individually pay the fees for them to participate? Big difference. Big difference.
It's drastically terrible.
It's a big
The
difference.
The money from the church, it's a tough one. I've struggled with this for a lot of years, so.
I know, this is why we're talking about this now. Because it's going to go into a whole other thing. So, does everyone understand the concept of a sponsoring church? It's no different than the concept of a parachurch organization, except it's within the congregations of the Church of Christ. One is outside, one is inside. That's the only difference. That is literally the only difference. Okay? All right. Now that you guys understand this, we're going to go into more what you were talking about. Okay?
See, we're not hiring out the training of our children to them, we're just going to see how much we got done. We're doing the training here, that's just going to see how much we got. That's the deal with me, is we're not going, okay, kids, go to L2L college and get your learning done. No, we're teaching them here.
Yeah, we're teaching.
And then we're just going to see how much they learn.
Yeah.
It's a completely different deal.
Yeah.
It would be way different if I was like, kids, you're gonna go to boarding school, L2L, and you'll come back in a few months. That's way different to me than, hey, we're gonna go just see how well we do. That's to me, it's a completely different organization.
Okay. It's really funny, like you're saying it, like how you're saying it is, that to me is accurate. It's not an organization. We're doing everything here within. That's not an organization. Whenever we were talking about this, that congregation was doing all that. You're outsourcing. It's the same principle as outsourcing your stuff. Okay? And here's a really funny thing, and this is one that, all right, this is like a personal one for me, like a personal pet peeve thing for me. But lumped into all this together. So what did minus that thing changing? What else did everything in there have in common?
Support with our nations.
Support, money, the budget. The budget in congregations was one of the biggest reasons that causes splits. One of the biggest. Because here's the funny thing. You notice that we can agree on Scripture. We can agree on it. What can we not ever seem to agree on? Money. How is an okay way to spend money? And the fact of the matter is each one of those works of the church, there is a money component, one way or another. Everything costs money. From the lights that we have in here to the support we give people, it all comes down to money, or the help that we give people. So going back to that, remember, money and then the works of the church. What are the works of the church? Edification, benevolence, and evangelism. Would you believe me when I said that there is a huge deal made, and it's ongoing as well, along with the sponsoring church arrangement would be the main one here, or the para organization, and eating at the building.
And these
That is a major one, too. That is lumped in together with this. What was your question?
this is all Church of Christ.
Correct.
All-
Correct. This is all division within the church.
And every group that calls itself a Christian has these same internal fights within them. Every Christendom, every Baptist, Methodist. The Methodists recently just split up. Now there's something else. Like there's always some kind of every group.
But so that gets into within the church, what it would be if we have to categorize things is where we have institutional, non-institutional. And honest truth is, probably somewhere in the middle is the right place to be. But I'm going to give you this example of eating in the building, for example.
Cody, I just noticed, Jessica actually pointed out, I don't follow him anymore, but Jack Wilkie on social media, he actually next week is talking about this.
This is a big thing.
It's still a thing. I guess I'm under a rock.
It is. This is like a huge thing within the church.
There's a congregation over on Portland that's big about us in Miami for years. They probably got 150 or 200 people that go there that think it's a sin to eat in the building.
So before you move on, I have a question. I think we can ask questions in here. No, I don't have the answer to. So Portland, the works that we support, Paul, so the ones that we currently support, and the ones we recently supported, possibly in the future. So like at Bear Valley, when we write the check, we send it to Bear Valley Bible Institute. Now it is in the memo a name to somebody because they have to have so much in their budget before they can attend there. So it's assigned to them. But it goes to Bear Valley to use however they need to support their students. They just have to make sure it's all covered.
And so because of how it's written to me, like that would be someone coming to us asking for support. Because in all cases that I know within our congregation, anytime someone has come and asked for support to go, we are supporting that person. And so we're not supporting that. Yes, that would eventually go to supporting Bear Valley, but that is someone paying their tuition. And we have it in the memo of who it's for.
Giving that responsibility to Bear Valley to train that person.
Well, I would think that Paul, whenever he divided, he really didn't want one guy. He's like, I don't want you, I want him. When they were giving support to Paul, do you think Paul ever gave any of that to his followers? I think it did.
I would think so.
Absolutely.
Because it would be like
They would give it to Paul, and Paul would be like,
they're
okay,
helpers.
I'm helping, he was training them, and he would give them
But
money,
then
food.
again, we also have examples of Aquila and Priscilla accompanying Paul, and they were making tents to support themselves. The whole idea of the support for that missionary and that group was so that they could devote full time to the work, which I get that. I think that's good. And that's what I think that's how I would look at that. Because we're listing specifically what that's for. It's not just a blanket thing to Bear Valley.
As long as you don't Ananias and Sapphira.
And we were doing that
Don't do that.
based on that person being there. If they're not there, we don't do
And I should have prefaced by saying, I've had opportunity to disagree with all of these, and I don't. So, I don't disagree with these,
Mhm.
but just to consider them.
it. It is, I mean, and we have, like Joe Wells, to me, that's supporting a missionary.
So with Joe Wells, so that's why I bring it up. So they're actually different structures. Everything we support is a different structure. So Joe Wells, we send the money to, oh my goodness.
I'm guessing
Spring Meadows,
he
Church
had-
of Christ.
Okay.
And
See,
they,
that one, I didn't know that.
so then they support, oversee Joe Wells Ministries.
It's a gray area.
No, it's not
Beyond great.
We're gonna have to take a look at that.
And then, so that's structure number 2. So all different structures.
That would be a sponsored church.
And then structure number 3 is Excel Stillmore Incorporated, where they don't have any elder oversight or any church oversight. It's just a business, an incorporation.
See, I like with the Joe Wells thing, I would be more comfortable if we were writing it to Joe Wells or his like LLC. Because I know we have to, in our society, we have to do that in order to, for like tax purposes and stuff like that. But that one, I didn't know that.
I think taxes cause us too many problems.
They do.
Yeah.
Well,
They do.
I think we're afraid of them too much as a church, because Jesus is like, just pay them. When they asked him, he said, just pay them. It's not a big deal. That was his response to the whole thing. The 501c3 didn't exist at the time, and he said individuals pay. Now, did the group pay? We don't know. They probably did. The publican came over and said, hey, you got all these groups, give me $100.
I don't know that businesses were actually taxed. I think it was all individual tax.
And
But-
it's complicated with church and taxes. There are reasons, you're right, there are reasons that they have those structures, because they're advantageous. And you don't want to put, like, for example, a minister is the only occupation, in the whole IRS system, it's the only occupation that you can give a housing allowance to, a substantial one, and it's not taxable. So you would do that for your minister. In fact, some churches, they give pretty generous housing allowances, because included in that is like furniture, utilities, and none of that income is taxable.
Okay. I've got to get us back on track because we are going to run out of time. Okay, so the fellowship. Oh, well, I don't know what to call it that. We have a fellowship room and we're in it. Because first of all, the concept of fellowship only exists really between us and God. It is a spiritual fellowship that we have with God and with each other. And we only have it with each other because we have it with God. That is the only reason. That is the only thing for fellowship. So, I like to call it the kitchen. We have a kitchen. There's nothing wrong with having a kitchen. Not scripturally that I can find. Now, these same people, first off, they like to run to 1 Corinthians 14. That is the first place they go. 1 Corinthians 14 11. 1 Corinthians 11 verses 20 and then down to verse 34. And let's actually look at it and read it. Okay? And first what I want to do is I want to read the verses. I want us to read the verses first. Just those two. And then we'll actually read the context of what's going on.
What was it, 1 Corinthians what?
It's 1 Corinthians 11, verse 22. Sorry, verse 22. So, verse 22, what? Do you not have houses in which to eat and drink in? Or do you despise the church of God and shame those who have nothing? What shall I say to you? Shall I praise you? In this, I will not praise you. Now let's go down to 34. If anyone is hungry, let him eat at home, so that you will not come together for judgment. The remaining matters I will arrange. just on face value, reading those two verses, what would you get out of that? What would you get out of that? There's only one thing you can.
No eating in the building.
No eating in the building. When we come together, no eating.
We can't eat at all.
I mean, well, you can't, you can protect the Lord's Supper.
Well, yes, but if we're worshiping anywhere, if we're worshiping at the lake, you can't eat
You
there.
can't eat. When the congregation comes together, you cannot eat. Okay, and that was going back to what Jeremy was talking about. So if, say, me, Josh, Zane, Trey, and Jeremy, we all went fishing. We went down to Wetonka, and then we stopped and we ate some tacos. We went down there and we ate tacos together. Is that wrong?
According to this, according to how you're reading this, yes. Because we're the church.
Because when we come together, right?
Because
Because
we're the church.
we're the church.
If you're interpreting that.
Okay. Now what I'd like to do is let's go to, let's go to 1 Corinthians 11:17. Okay? But in giving this instruction, I do not praise you because you come together not for the better, but for the worse. For in the first place, when you come together as a church, I hear divisions exist among you, and in part I believe it. For there must also be factions among you, so that those who are approved may become evident. Therefore, when you meet together, it is not to eat the Lord's Supper. For each of you in your eating, each one takes up his own supper first. One is hungry and another is drunk. That does not mean wasted. That means full, satisfied. Okay? What? Do you not have houses in which to eat and drink? Or do you despise the church of God and shame those who have nothing? What shall I say to you? Shall I praise you in this? I will not praise you. For I received from the Lord that which I also delivered to you, that the Lord Jesus, in the night in which he was betrayed, took bread. And when he had given thanks, he broke it and said, "This is my body, which is for you. Do this in remembrance of me." In the same way he took the cup also after supper, saying, "This cup is the new covenant in my blood. Do this as often as you drink it in remembrance of me. For as often as you eat this bread and drink this cup, you proclaim the Lord's death until he comes. Therefore, whoever eats the bread or drinks the cup of the Lord in an unworthy manner shall be guilty of the body and the blood of the Lord. But a man must examine himself, and in so doing he is to eat of the bread and drink the cup. For he who eats and drinks judgment to himself, if he does not judge the body rightly. For this reason many among you are weak and sick, and a number sleep. But if we judged ourselves rightly, we would not be judged. But when we are judged, we are disciplined by the Lord, so that we will not be condemned along with the world. So then, brethren, when you come together to eat, wait for one another. If anyone is hungry, let him eat at home, so that you will not come together for judgment. The remaining matters I will arrange when I come. Now, question. Is this talking about a meal? A common meal, a social meal? Is that what this is talking about?
I'm thinking spiritually fed.
They
I'm thinking it's talking about the Lord's Supper.
have tried to make it a common meal, is what it seems like at the beginning. They've come in and just been like, well, go ahead, you're gonna eat over here, you're gonna eat over there. I've eaten a bunch, and y'all go ahead when you're gonna pray. It's a big, they're just nonchalant. It's become very common.
Correct.
They're not taking this as a holy matter.
They're not treating it as a holy matter. Is the Lord's Supper something you were supposed to do for sustenance?
Yeah.
For food? Is it actually for food? No. Is Paul in any way talking about not eating in the building? In this?
Back to the Passover wasn't for sustenance.
to remember.
It was all, it was separate.
So that's something we have to understand. Now, their argument, it's really funny. Because in what I've seen, in what I've studied, first the argument goes here. And it's because in verse 34 he says, if anyone is hungry, let him eat at home. Now, is that talking about a plurality of people? Or is that talking about a person that is hungry? A single person that is hungry. That's my question to you. Is anyone a plural word? Is that a plural? Anyone.
King James says, if any man hunger.
It's specific.
Just one person.
A man or if anyone who is hungry, first of all. Because guess what? If you're hungry, your mind's not right. Because you're thinking about that. Instead of thinking about the death, burial, and resurrection of Jesus Christ.
Or, how about this? Say, you come in here hungry, and you're thirsty, and you're like, man, might chip off an extra little bit of that bread. You know?
But it's the point of it is you're not thinking about what it means.
Yeah, you're not thinking about.
That was their whole problem. This church had lots of problems. They had immorality going on. They had sexual immorality going on in the church that they did not perform church discipline on. They are not partaking of the Lord's Supper correctly. They are, in using their spiritual gifts, they're trying to one-up everybody. So you have to think about it in that way. What is being talked about by Paul from 11:17 until the end of chapter 14 is a worship service. They're coming together to worship. What is going on in this worship? Does that have any bearing on eating lunch after church?
There's another, no.
And I'm going to keep going. I'm going to keep going in the run of time. So we can go back now. They'll say, okay, well, you can, if this is pointed out, then we'll go, let's go back to Acts. Let's go to Acts chapter 2. Now I'm presenting these arguments to you. We're going to go to Acts chapter 2. And we're going to look at verse 46. Somebody read Acts 2:46 really loud.
Every day they continued to meet together in the temple courts. They broke bread in their homes and ate together with glad and sincere hearts.
All right, well, I mean, it has to be you can't eat here. Because it says in Acts 2:46 that they ate in their homes together. It absolutely does. But what bearing does that have on us right here? Because the one thing, and by the way, those are the three verses that are used to support the argument, to try to support the argument scripturally. Okay? Those are the three arguments that are used in this manner. The question is, how did they get around Acts chapter 20, verse 7 through 12? Let's look at it. Acts 20, verses 7 through 12.
Can we read it?
I'll read it. On the first day of the week, when we were gathered together to break bread, Paul began talking to them, intending to leave the next day, and he prolonged his message until midnight. There were many lamps in the upper room where we were gathered together. And there was a young man named Eutychus sitting in the windowsill, sinking into a deep sleep. And as Paul kept talking, he was overcome by sleep and fell down from the third floor and was picked up dead. But when Paul went down and fell upon him, and after embracing him, he said, "Do not be troubled, for his life is in him." when he had gone back up and had broken the bread and eaten, he talked with them a long while until daybreak, and they left. Kind of a pickle, isn't it? Because what happened? What were they doing on the first day of the week? Paul had lingered in Troas for 7 days in order to do what? To break bread with the congregation. On what day? On Sunday, first day of the week. And he preached until midnight when that boy fell out of the window. And he picked him up and he went back up and ate. And they ate. Now, were they partaking of the Lord's Supper?
First time?
No, I mean, in whenever they ate, were they partaking of the Lord's Supper? After the boy fell out of the window, were they partaking of the Lord's
I would
Supper?
say no, because I would say the first time it mentions them breaking bread together.
Well, see, the problem would become, what time did the boy fall out of the window?
Monday.
On Monday.
So that-
So did they partake of the Lord's Supper on Monday?
No.
So there were two things done, right? There was the Lord's Supper that was partaken of by the congregation, and Paul taught. And then there was a meal that happened after midnight with that same congregation.
In the same room.
In the same room that they were meeting together and speaking. And Paul continued speaking after the meal. How do you get around that?
So trying to break bread always means more something.
That first one does.
It's kind of like the word communion.
And then you know that.
Communion always means more something.
You know that second one can't because it was on Monday.
Well,
Now the argument, whenever this is pointed out, the argument is that they were going by the Jewish first day of the week.
Why would they?
Because the Sabbath day ends at sundown, and the first day of the week starts when it gets dark.
so they showed up on Saturday and they waited till sundown to break bread. You had to prove it. You couldn't prove either way.
But my point is, here's my point. Who is the book of Acts addressed to? Is it addressed to a Jewish audience? Or is it addressed to a Greek audience or a Roman audience?
Access. All of those.
Dear Theophilus, who is Luke writing to? A Roman. And the Roman concept of time is the same one we have. Midnight to midnight is a day. Therefore, logically, it would dictate that if them eating a meal after the boy fell out of the window cannot be the Lord's Supper, because the Lord's Supper is to be partaken of when? On the first day of the week.
So that means he mentioned midnight on purpose.
He mentioned midnight on purpose. Because why would you mention that? Why would that ever be mentioned? What does it matter? A boy fell out the window at night because he fell asleep because Paul talked a long time.
Somewhere in the night, he talked a long time.
That's all you have to say.
It's a very minor detail.
It is very minor unless you look at it.
Unless you're trying to prove it.
That point, that verse is always excluded in the argument. If they're trying to say that. Now, the problem is there's a circular logic to this thinking. In that immediately, whenever you go to this, it becomes, well, you can't use church funds for that because it's not a work of the church. That's why I brought up works of the church. Again, what are the works of the church?
Evangelism, edification, and
Benevolence. There was a thing during the 60s and 70s it's a concept entitled the social gospel. Has anyone ever heard of that?
Sounds familiar.
Leslie shook his head. Can you give me an example of what the social gospel would be? order to bring others and get them in here to try to evangelize? Yes. It'd be the example of doing like carnivals in order to evangelize people. Okay? It's the same thing as if we have our meal every Sunday right after church. But are we saying, hey, y'all come to this meal? Are we using the meal in order to bring others into the church to try to teach them? Or are we just saying, you should just come to church?
It's how big the waste is.
Hey.
But I agree. I agree with their idea of saying, I agree with it, so the social gospel is a wrong way to do it. It's wrong. I agree with that. Because you have a great example of that kind of thinking would be, okay, when Jesus fed the 5,000 in, I think it's John chapter 4. When the 5,000 were fed, was that an evangelism thing that Jesus was doing? It was a miracle, but there was a purpose behind it. Was it an evangelism thing? Or was it a benevolence thing? I hope you all say the second. Those people had been following Jesus in order to hear him teach, but also to see signs, performing miracles with them. But what did Jesus have on those people after they had been there and listened to him all day and they were way out of town? What was a big thing that he had compassion?
They were already there.
Feeding the 5,000, which they like to say, oh yeah, they use that to justify having a meal. No. Feeding the 5,000 was a benevolent work.
They were already there for the teaching.
They were already there for the
They
teaching.
were hungry.
It was a benevolent work. We don't have any examples of using that to lure people in. But we do have an example of teaching happening and you can eat after.
Quicker.
Yeah, I guess you can split it. There was a break there. So the whole thing, the concept that we have in those of us that kind of think that there's nothing wrong with it, we think we view it as a matter of opinion. They don't view it that way. And they like to, but we make the mistake in the argument of saying it's about the location. Well, at one time, yeah, it was, but now it's not. It's not about the location. At the end of the day, it circles back to the funding. Is it okay to have a kitchen and the church, say the church pays for the meal? They're supplying the food.
Still think it's first world problems.
It is. These are dumb things to argue about. I agree.
It's stupid, a lot of this. I'm like, you go into support parts of the world where, and this is, like, you're gonna argue whether or not you have a seat.
Yeah.
Or whether when we come together, are you arguing about whether or not you can eat, when we don't even know if we're gonna have a food.
Right.
But it becomes an issue because those that think that this is wrong tend to attach that to the social gospel. They paint with a very broad brush. They're painting a 1-inch piece of pipe with a 12-inch roller. They brush it all on everybody. Now, I would argue that our fellowship meals are for edification, strengthening and growing in love together. Because I can tell you right now that wouldn't be the case for me. If we got rid of it, those congregations they get very cliquey and people will go do their own thing together. And they'll all have their own little group to go do things together. And the time spent together, which is what I want, because my fellowship is with God. And I want to have that fellowship with God in common with other people. That's what fellowship is. It's It's a joint sharing together. That's all fellowship is. So that's why I say we eat lunch. I don't say we have a fellowship meal. We eat lunch together. And we have numerous examples of Christians eating together. This is, the Lord's Supper is the fellowship meal. That's our fellowship meal. That's why I don't say that's a fellowship room, a fellowship hall. That's the kitchen. This is the fellowship hall.
Doesn't it seem like the common thing, though, is farming out responsibility?
It is, and that comes back to the money thing tends to be the biggest thing that causes problems. How is it okay for a congregation to use their money? Because another congregation thinks it's wrong for another autonomous congregation to use their money to do that, and it benefits our members. Can anybody say that our lunch is not a beneficial thing? Do you feel that it's edifying? Like, is it edifying? Does it strengthen you to be and share a meal together with other people that are also Christians? It does. It's an edification thing. Now, if we were out advertising and say, "Hey, come eat lunch and da-da-da with us, and we're using that, if we're using that as the reason to evangelize, then it does become wrong. But we don't do that. If you go outside, the only reason that the community here knows that we do that is because they see us up here eating together. Did you all know that? We don't advertise it. It's not for that. But that broad brush gets painted. So to me, a work of edification for our congregation, that is a scripturally backed thing. Because we're edifying in all things. We're to edify one another in everything that we do.
You're right, this is a big division.
But money is what causes it, because the argument always goes back to how are you using your money. That is where the actual lines of fellowship have been drawn, is on the money argument, whether people want to acknowledge it or not.
It's important, we do need to worry about that.
We do, and we have to be good stewards. But their problem is the issue that has come up is that because that's not the work of the church, the money shouldn't be spent. Just like if someone came up and needed, help with a bill, and they weren't a member of the church. They say that's a wrong use of the money and of the Lord's money because it's already been given to the Lord, and that's to further the work of the church.
Teaching the gospel is pretty much the only way you can spend money in that view.
Correct. Or benevolence within the church.
Very limited.
Very limited.
Very limited.
And so,
Only the 60-year-old with woman who is a widow who has no family. That's
Right.
the only way you can spend money on a person.
Yeah, you could hold that too, but be very specific. Only when there's a family in a church needs help, not a club.
yes.
It's a family. I mean, you could
You
get
can.
very specific.
And see, I want to point out an interesting thing to you guys. Someone go real fast to Galatians chapter 6, verse 10. I want you to read Galatians chapter 6, verse 10.
Chapter what?
Chapter 6, verse 10.
Therefore, as we have opportunity, let us do good to all people, especially to those who belong to the believers.
All right, the same argument that is used for the fellowship hall, that's it. For the kitchen being built, is the same argument used here. It's just flipped backwards. So, do good to all men, especially those of the household of faith. is that a individual responsibility? Or is that, yeah, it is.
Oh,
Oh,
yeah.
absolutely it is. Or is it does that mean it's a congregational responsibility?
Well, but we make up the congregation.
Okay, there you go, that's one way. Individuals make up that congregation. So if it's congregational, it doesn't come out of your pocket, it comes out of
Comes out of our pocket.
it comes out of what they call the church treasury. So is that okay? Now, note, I want everyone to notice that they said that the argument on that side that also says that a kitchen is wrong, and it's wrong to eat because the church could possibly pay for some things. You also go back to, they say this is an individual, that is an individual command. Okay? Now let me read you, I'm going to read you this again. 1 Corinthians 11:34. If anyone is hungry, let him eat at home, so that you will not come together for judgment. The remaining matters I will arrange when I come. That same argument they use to say that Galatians 6:10 is an individual responsibility, this is portrayed as a congregational responsibility. Now tell me if that logic follows. Does that logic follow?
I don't think you can justify the whole building. That's what, I've gotten arguments, well, how can you have a building, I can't have a light bill, how can you have, you can't justify anything when you start going down. You can't start paying for this or paying for that.
Oh, those are expedients. Come on.
What about if we pay for the songbooks?
That's what I mean. How is that logic? How can you follow that logic? Other than you wanting to you have come to a conclusion and you're trying to use Scripture to support your conclusion instead of using Scripture to form that conclusion. It can't be done. I will say right now, I think that in the world we live in, like the benevolence argument, paying for somebody outside the church should be limited. It should be, but that comes down to a matter of judgment by us. It's a matter of judgment because you don't want to not help someone. If someone needs help with their bills paid, we might do it once. But we're not going to continue doing it because they'll just come back and they're being supported by us. Is there anything wrong? Now I'm going to go back to the kitchen. Is there really anything wrong in our situation? I'm just talking about our situation. Is there anything wrong with having that kitchen there? Scripture. Can anybody find anything wrong with that? Because in my mind, it is a work of the church. It is an edifying thing.
I would say, the only concern I have with any of this discussion is what turns into an idol in our lives. What can be an idol? Anything and everything. If it is put over God, if our kitchen is more important than the real gospel, if it's more important, then anything can be turned into that. Are we doing that now? I don't believe any of us would say that it is overshadowing our gospel preaching, trying to edify and trying to raise up. It does not overshadow the work,
Right.
the three works of the church, in so much that it takes away from any of those others.
And it doesn't violate the work of the church. To me.
So it doesn't
Because, like how we are doing it, that's for us. That's for us to be together. And I know that they'll say you should want to be together.
You know, if we had a bunch of widows who were in need, and we said, well, we're going to build a kitchen rather than help our widows, that's when we know, okay, kitchen's too much.
Maybe build a kitchen in order to help.
It would be a discussion. It would be a discussion, especially if that would put them, but we would, That's when you really start, and you can see examples of that, where, well, we're gonna do this instead of, that's like why Jesus turned the money changer tables over. You're selling what should not be, you're doing it wrong, you're doing it wrong.
But the order,
Yeah, I
like,
think they're
if
wrong.
you think about it, this money discussion encompasses all of what we've talked about. Where it goes to Bible class, who's got to pay for the materials. Whether or not you have a paid preacher at the building. That's the discussion. It's about the money. Whether or not we have a kitchen. How we support missionaries. All of that stuff comes back to money. And one thing we have to learn to do is we have to learn how to distinguish whether something is a Romans 14 issue or is it a 1 Corinthians 6 issue.
That's where it gets tough.
And there's a lot in there. But I know as far as the fellowship goes, I am not going to destroy Christ for the sake of food. I am not. That is why I believe it's a stupid argument. There is no reason to draw a line of fellowship on that.
You know, there's one thing you can say, and I've said it to my in-laws on the division. I'll say, I'll go to one verse. I'll bring it to Sandra all the time. I'll say, I'm going to say the same verse. You're not going to like it. And I'll read 1 Corinthians 14:35. If there is anything they desire to learn, let them ask their husbands at home. For it is shameful for a woman to speak in church. And I say, woman, if you say another word, you're going to sin against God and everybody in here. And I said, if you're going to take the same reading of the Bible of not eating and not having a preacher, I don't want to hear you say another peep when you drive on location. I said, none of those people, none of those women, the second they drive in the parking lot, they should shut their mouth only to sing, and I said, possibly amen, but you can discuss that. But for sure, only to sing. If I hear words that, if I hear a woman talking about, like, oh, Aunt Betty did that, if I hear saying anything, she ain't going to heaven. She can't go to heaven. Because look, let her ask at home. We understand what he's saying in the context, don't we?
Context determines a lot, and if, I know that my stuff is done, but if one thing that I wanted y'all to get out of this is that I wanted you guys to understand what the arguments were on that, because it's like I told you at the beginning, somewhere in the middle is probably the right answer. Between one edge to the other. It really is.
But he wants unity, not division.
And correct. But you can't.
No,
Right.
unity
And-
is God is the place.
I mean, I hope that this has kind of opened y'all up to see kind of what's out there and what's being talked about. And I really appreciate y'all putting up with me for 8 months, 9 months.
We put up with you.
I know it was all over the place, and I'm sorry.
As far as we know, we're going to see you some more.
Yeah.
And I didn't get, I mean, and truthfully, guys, this is not all the arguments
Right.
that happen. But I encourage everyone to study this stuff and figure out, is this a Romans 14 issue or is it not? Because truthfully, if it's not a Romans 14 issue, then it's probably a scriptural issue. And the Romans 14 issue, if you're going to stick to the letter of it, if you're not going to go by the principle, if you're just going to stick to the letter of it, that just deals with food and days. But there's a principle behind it. There's a principle behind it in that we do have freedom to do things. We have freedom to use expedience in order to serve. And if the goal isn't to go this way, what are we doing? Why are we arguing with one another about these dumb things? It is okay for someone to think it's wrong. That's a conscience issue. And if someone thinks it's wrong, it's okay. It does not mean that we should sever fellowship.
Right.
Because it's an opinion.
Who gives way? Paul gives us an example. When
one of them on both sides of this argument thinks the other one is just stuck in their position. Neither one's given way. Because of all, and really what it turns out to me, in my study of all this, is it's old grudges that have been taught down. It's a tradition. It is an absolute tradition. Passed down from one person to another, taught as truth. And there's only one truth. And we're the ones that have to see it. And it only comes through God's word. So I thank y'all for the good class. Y'all did great. All right, thank you.